This room is it's just such a thrill to be back up here, where so many great conversations have been hosted over the past decade. You saw some clips up there, and I popped up on one that must be like 4 years old, and I was thinking, like, how many other clips are there out there that I might regret if you threw up into that montage? But it actually been some amazing moments where people have come up here and sort of worked through the intricacies of the challenges of making movies in an ever-changing landscape. And that's what we're digging into today, with a conversation that really covers this wide spectrum of challenges that people face, specifically at the early phases of their careers trying to get films made. So what we're going to do is we're going to hear from different people who have worked through those challenges. And one of the things that's really great about it is that you're going to hear from something that's on the horizon, in addition to some of the people that we've heard from in the past. So I'd like to bring out our panelists, and I'd like to start with the two men who are working on this new initiative from American Zoetrope called Decentralized Pictures, Leo Matchett and Mike Musant. Can you come up, please? So that's their project, and you'll hear from them in a little bit. Additionally, the founder of this extraordinary project called Brown Girls Doc Mafia, which has just been an incredible support system for filmmakers from a wide range of backgrounds to figure out how to get their work out there. Iyabo Boyd, please come up. Welcome. And finally, I don't know how many of you have had a chance to check out Damrush Park this year in the outdoor screenings that they're doing there, but they did this extraordinary screening the other night of Mississippi Masala, and what a great opportunity to be back here celebrating Mira and Nair. So happy to have you. And everyone, please have a seat, get comfortable. So the subject of today's conversation is emerging filmmakers. And while I do want to talk a bit about decentralized pictures, the other side of this panel is sort of the drum roll to what you're dealing with, because one of the things that I think is fascinating, if you look at the sort of modern history of filmmaking, is that a lot of these challenges in terms of getting films made haven't changed so much over the years. Now, Mira, I thought it might be great for you to kind of kick us off and talk a bit about Salam Bombay and getting your career off the ground when, you know, it wasn't so easy to just say, I have this great idea for a story, give me some money so I can get it made. What, when you look back on that, were sort of the key challenges of actually getting to the point where this was a film that could actually get produced and then find its way into a market with a real audience?
I made my first film, which is Salam Bombay, 1988. Fresh out of 7 years of making documentary films, cinema verite films. And I made the film, financed the film by sheer scams, and I would like to introduce you to some scams, because it's very, very important that you understand the nature of how to scam before you fund your first film. And might be still variations on the same theme 40 years later. But with Salam Bombay, I went to the people who had financed my documentaries, and one of them was Channel 4 Television in England, who it was a pretty radical place at the time, no longer, but it was then, they had bought my films before, so I went to them, and they were very, very, they had a brown commissioning editor, Farooq Dhondi, and you know, this is the time when it was not fashionable to be brown, black, or any of that. And now we have a sort of spotlight, thankfully, from where it has come, we know, but you know, it's important. But then we were completely the marginal of the marginal. Anyhow, it helped to have that ear at Channel 4, and he recommended that they would give me 50% of my budget, which was $960,000, if I would raise the other 50. And that's where the scam came in, because I just could not raise 50,000, the 50%. And I had the Indian government to give me a little piece of it, and I told Channel 4 that I had more than I had, so that they could give me, you know, the 400,000 that I needed from them. And then I kept hustling and would literally do workshops in the day in Bombay with street kids, and at night, because of the time zones, work the phones, you know. And went to Europe, went to Paris, you know, went to places that could give me pieces of money. And frankly, that was the only way that even larger films that I've made, The Namesake I made with Fox Searchlight, which was a very big success, I don't know, 10 to 15 years later, was same thing. 1/3 Fox Searchlight, 1/3 a Japanese company that had loved my documentaries and my feature films, and 1/3 an Indian investor. This style of funding, this way, enables the filmmaker to have full creative freedom. And that is something I'm really used to, I need, and I do my best work when they allow me to. I've done the studios as well, but this is the way to preserve independence, and right from the beginning, to preserve maybe a sense of an ownership of copyright, which is really quite important, and never is always given away because we are so desperate to get the financing. So I can talk further on this. I don't want to be the one, but I can also say that funding is entirely dependent on the subject that you're trying to tell. If you were at that time in the 80s or 90s into rom-coms with two white people cavorting around wherever, it would be much easier to get funding, but you'd be forgotten because you'd just be one of a list. My thing has been always to do what I have to do and what I want to do, and how to make it work, and how to make it work without kowtowing, without like I said to you on that night on Mississippi Masala, when I was pitching Mississippi Masala after a big success of Salam Bombay and Oscars and the whole 9 yards, I was still asked, even with Denzel Washington, to make room for a white protagonist, was the exact line. And I, laughed and said all the waiters in the film will be white, but I did not keep that promise either. But the thing is, it's that, it's the subject matter, it's the politics, it's the color of your politics, it's all of that which tells you how tough it's going to be,
Right, and I think the key point of what you're talking about here is this was not an isolated situation when you started your career. It's been continuous.
Throughout. I'm going to Paris tomorrow, begging bowl in hand for my next film.
Right.
I mean, it's a manner of saying I'll have access to the heads of studios now. Okay,
it's a little
fine.
bit better for you.
But still, I'm making a female-centric, film about a pioneering modern Indian artist who nobody knows of. Mm-hmm. Essentially, our Frida Kahlo. Amrita Shergill is her name, and she's unbelievable. She's as great as Gauguin. But the point is that no one will know about her. No one does know about her, and still I have to sell her, in a way that makes it palpable for a financier. It's a fiction, but it's a
narrative
big
film.
fiction narrative.
So Iyabo, listening to this whole story is, I think, a good setup for Brown Girls Doc Mafia, because, I mean, in terms, I do feel like there's a lineage here.
Let me give you the sizzle, the masala.
I mean, seriously, come on, an icon, inspiration, shivers. Thank you for everything that you've done.
Can you talk, though, a bit about, because I think one thing that's important to explain about what you've done is, one is you've facilitated a conversation about the problems of representation in the documentary world, but also put a plan to action and created a support system to fix that. So can you talk a bit about how those ambitions evolved for you?
Sure. So thank you for having me. Brown Girls Doc Mafia is an organization that supports women and non-binary individuals of color working in documentary and the film industry around the world. We have over 5,000 members. We support them through advocacy, through community building, grant making, and professional and artistic development. It's year-round. We launched our first grant last season, so we've been around for 5 years. So we're young, and it began from a place of isolation. This feeling of not knowing who else is out there doing what you want to do, and if anyone gives a crap. But also, the folks folks of color who were working were being neglected in terms of artistic enrichment and financing, of course, and also the tokenism. Even if you did get in the room, you were the only one, and you were only there to serve certain purposes that had nothing to do with what your aspirations were. So that's where it began, I was working as an executive at Chicken Neck Pictures at the time, so I had access to come to NYFF and Sundance and go to places where I was realizing that if you go you go every year, you start learning the ropes, people start recognizing you, seeing you over and over again. It's about the repetition for the filmmaker, for that organic je ne sais quoi to happen, for folks to track you, et cetera, et cetera. But Sundance is really expensive, as we all know, and getting into certain parties is really difficult if you don't know anyone. And so I had a privilege that I realized that hundreds of other women and non-binary people of color did not have the kind of access. And I wanted to disrupt that, just to completely break it down and work with the folks on that who were creating those spaces, who I'd made relationships with over the time to help me do that, to show up at Sundance with 150 brown faces on Main Street, which, as far as I know, the 10 years that I've been going to Sundance had never seen before. So it began with showing up in these kind of really crucial spaces for filmmakers to network and to be seen and noticed, et cetera. And then I just kept building into a community. We actually started with the South Asian filmmakers. We'll start with black women that I met at a Good Pitch in 2016, I think, in a room that I had never seen that many black women specifically who worked in documentary all at the same time, and I didn't know them. I was like, wait, who are you? How are you here? And I don't know who you are. I'm so confused. And I've been working in this industry long enough that at least we should know each other. And it wasn't the case. And we all went for a drink afterward and, rejoiced in this connection and put a picture up on Facebook. And then it just kind of went viral and became Brown Girls. And then a few really close friends who were South Asian women filmmakers reached out and were like, we want to do something too. We want to do a Desi Girls Doc Mafia. And I was like, well, let's just do it together, And so it became this thing that was multicultural and sort of invite only. And we were private for 3 years before accidentally going public. And we were like, okay, it's accidentally been public, so let's just do it, And so now it's, turning into a 501c3 and we're giving grants and doing all this work, so.
Yeah. Really incredible trajectory there, especially the last little bit you stuffed into like 5 seconds, the grants and all that other stuff. But on for Mike and Leo, obviously we've established a foundation of so many different challenges for marginalized voices, and just in terms of getting to that first stage of getting their work recognized and supported. So, in hearing all of that, can you explain a bit about how the concept of decentralized pictures came together, and tell us a bit about really what it is now?
Yeah, sure. First, I just want to say, the work that you're doing we so deeply respect it and appreciate it, and so it's an honor to be with you guys. Really, I think that what we're trying to accomplish with DCP, with Decentralized Pictures, is you talk about the pitch. You talk about getting in those meetings, getting those relationships. It's getting that yes, and for in so many ways, getting to that is this process of building up connections and getting to know people and going out and having a drink and it's just so difficult unless there's the serendipity there, unless there's incredible hard work, and then even sometimes it doesn't pay off. And I think all filmmakers experience that, and I think what we are trying to implement with DCP is utilizing technology to provide a new tool that provides that yes through democratizing the decision-making process. It's about those decisions, right? Who says the yes, right? And so, whereas previously it was, in all these stories that you're telling, it's individuals, it's small groups of people, it's boardroom executives. We're trying to open that up and make that yes come from a more democratized group, the people who watch films, people who enjoy films, who consume films. And we believe, maybe we'll be proven wrong, but it's our belief and faith that you present great stories, you present compelling stories that show people a different perspective that they haven't experienced before, that you will, yes, when it's an insular group in a boardroom, it doesn't look like it may sell publicly. And so those small people are making that decision, but when it's people that actually make the decisions about what they want to watch and what compels them and moves them, we believe that our community will provide that yes to those who are talented and driven and incredibly capable, like you both are. So that's
But how does that happen? That means the people vote for your financing?
Essentially. That's in a nutshell. There's a lot more to it. There's a lot more layers, but that's basically it. The way that it works is, we're utilizing blockchain technology, and we can talk about how and why we do that. And Leo's an expert at blockchain and can talk about that. But we deploy that to leverage the wisdom of the crowd. So the way it will work is we'll post an award. It could be a financing award, and we want it to be financing in as many cases, as much as we possibly can. But it'll also be other awards. We've established partnerships with folks in the industry. We have mentors and people we're talking to for mentorships, and as many kinds of awards and support as we can provide. And we'll offer that to the community, and then our community members, filmmakers, and anyone anywhere in the world can sign up and join and participate. Community members who are filmmakers, who want to submit and vie for that award, submit their project, submit themselves as a filmmaker, submit their work, selfie-style pitch video, or here's who I am, here's my vision, here's why I think it's important. And then they do pay a fee that then dynamically goes into what we call a smart contract that automatically and transparently and in a distributed ledger pays out other members of the community for reviewing the project. So we're essentially having our community members pay peer-to-peer to get those opinions, and we want those opinions to be gathered on a massive scale, really. So it's in a way it's a data play. It's using data to gather opinions of our community of people who love film around the country, around the world, to say, this is what I want to see. This is the filmmaker I want to support. And we believe that this system, we will see how it works in application, but that will reach out in the world and elevate voices that haven't had an opportunity to be elevated, because they're telling great stories, they're telling meaningful and important stories.
I want to magnify something you touched on, which is a buzzword that I'm sure many of the industry people in this room have been hearing a lot and want to take advantage of, but they don't totally understand, and that's blockchain. So maybe, Leo, you could demystify for us a bit about the blockchain factor here and why it has value for people trying to get their films made.
Yeah, so it helps us solve the drinking from a fire hose problem and break down barriers by doing that. So, as like colleagues have said, it's difficult. You need to know someone. You need to have proximity. You need to have money or connections to sometimes just get your foot in the door. So the way we can break that barrier down through blockchain is through this incentive mechanism. Anyone can submit anything they want that they think is worth a story that's worth being told, and there's three main factors of why we need blockchain: transparency, efficiency, and rareness. So I can explain those one at a time, but basically the transparency is very important because we're going to be giving away resources, and we want to be able to validate that the voting process was fair and the most deserving artist is getting the support that we're giving away, whether it be monetary or some opportunity or production support. The efficiency is very important because we're solving the stamp is more valuable than the check in the envelope problem. We can dynamically pay out potentially thousands or hundreds of thousands of reviewers on a specific person's submission or project in a very efficient way for very, very low cost. And so when that person submits and they post that incentive to give an opinion on their project, everyone who gives the opinion will earn something for doing that. And that also brings in the inclusiveness, because by giving your opinion multiple times to multiple artists that you think are deserving, that value you're actually earning, which you can then use to submit your own project down the road. So you never actually have to pay anything to potentially get an opportunity. You just have to go in and start giving your opinion, and you'll build up user reputation, and you'll earn enough credit within the system to submit your own project down the road. So basically a blockchain is a voice of truth because it's a auditable and immutable ledger that everyone in the network shares. So, within a database, for example, which is how most tallies are done, or voting systems are done currently, the admin or whoever has admin rights on the database can really just go in and change something here, and since it's one voice of truth, no one or only the admins in that database would know that that piece of data was changed. With a decentralized database or a blockchain, decentralized ledger, you would need to convince 51% or whatever the margin for consensus is of that network that this change is valid. So no one can change the voting, essentially. We can validate that the voting is true and was fair. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I mean, I think obviously what we're talking about here is still, hypothetical, right? And one of the things that's worth looking at is that, you're not exclusively talking about crowdfunding. You're talking about almost crowdsourcing the idea of a movie and then bringing different people in who can be empowered to help get it made in a way that they hadn't been before.
Well, I would say, everyone understands crowdfunding, Kickstarter, Indiegogo, how that works. This is similar in nature because we're reaching out to the crowd. However, we're not asking them to give us money. We're saying, you're going to earn money for giving us an opinion, and then we will finance or give support to the winner from our network and from our film fund.
So, Mira, what do you think? You ready to submit a project for DCP's team of judges?
Well, I'm still getting a hang of it, but I must say that I would let others do that first. I think I have access to other funding, but it sounds interesting. I'm a little early for me to understand. I want to ask more. So you will advertise. So you'll advertise like a fund, right? That would be available, and then you would ask filmmakers to put their projects and their writing samples and their viewing, whatever, right? Sorry.
Yeah.
Please
Yeah. So, sorry. Basically, that's exactly right. We'll say we're giving an award for a documentary. Say it's $250,000. Yeah. Okay. Anyone who has a compelling story that's in documentary format that wants to apply for that $250,000, submit your project, your approach, your treatment, who you intend to interview, where you intend to shoot it, and give us a pitch video, selfie style, of yourself as a filmmaker, why it's important to you, why you think you're the best person to tell the story, and you're pitching the entire world, the ecosystem, and everyone who submits gets votes, and
from the votes come from anywhere.
The votes come from anywhere. That's right. But as people vote and participate, their user reputation will build up, and so it's not like every single person's vote is worth the exact same amount.
I see.
So as people are good at and their votes are determined to be important to the community, meaning that they get a lot of upvotes. They'll tend to have more weight than, say, someone who's just joining and may not have a lot of experience in the industry.
Because if you put this up in India, I'll get my whole tribe to say hello, and then 800,000 people will vote for me. So it might confuse you over there.
Right. So that's exactly why we need the reputation system.
I know.
Yeah.
Iyabo,
We've thought of that issue, and we've built that into the system. But and so yes, you could go and tell all of your friends, vote for me, vote for my project.
Yeah.
But there's a reputation system, and people who have a better track record, have a better track record of picking the projects that end up winning, but also engage in the community and participate in a lot of other ways and show their commitment to what the community's about. Their votes are weighted more than others. So if it's just somebody, if my dad goes and he votes, he's gonna start off with a very low score, and it'll be worth as much as anybody else who's never done anything on the site. So you get a certain a kind of equity for participation in the community, and you have more weight. And one of the things that Leo touched on is the upvoting, which is important. So it's the because it emphasizes how it's the community that's really, in this kind of conversation about the projects that are put up, are deciding which projects get elevated. If someone writes a review and other users find it insightful, be it a good review or a not so good review, if other users who find it insightful will say, I really like that, that's influenced me, I upvote it, that reviewer who wrote that review will actually get a larger portion of that payout. So there's an incentive for contributing your opinion, but also contributing an opinion in an honest and earnest way. And that's what we want. And we believe that combination of thoughtful and earnest opinions will help us to find really great work and elevate great young talent.
I want to bring Iyabo back into this. First of all, obviously, if you have any other questions about DCP, you can fire away. But in terms of your own experience with sort of bringing a community together to help the work you were trying to do gain the support it needed, I mean, what kind of insights did you get out of just the process of cultivating that kind of base? Because you talked a bit about seeing these faces in a room that you hadn't seen before in those numbers, and I think it's interesting when you think about translating that to something that's online. In your case, it started online and then it moved into a physical space. So, what did you sort of learn about sort of the process of cultivating a community online that can actually make a difference in terms of how things get made?
It's a really interesting question. I mean, I think from the context of women and non-binary people of color, because of the tokenism and us being accidentally and also purposefully kept from each other for so long, it means that it's difficult to create like a consensus for what our voice is until we are in that space. And so once in there, it's like in working in a multicultural concept, it's really everything at once. It's hard to pin it down on one thing, but for us, it's about vulnerability, and that's why I was sort of talking to Mike and Leo earlier about like how do you build the community, because for us, it's about vulnerability and safety, and nourishment, which are kind of like woo-woo things, but that's what I think the future of this industry needs to incorporate a bit more when talking about community building, because it's a who you know kind of business. But who you know is related to so many things related to justice and racism and geography and class that the industry has never engaged with. And so all the my organization and others on my level who are, I think, the next generation, of changing this industry are approaching it completely from that point of view. And I think that's where everyone is going, especially after the pandemic. We're all focusing more on like what are my needs and how can I make the world around me in a shape that like fits for me so I can thrive. I hope that answers your question in some way.
In several ways. Well, one of the things I think we've touched on as well is that the barrier for entry isn't just really high for filmmakers, it's very confusing.
Yeah.
That there's an entire ecosystem of influencers who make a difference in terms of how a film comes to the market. And usually, if you're in film school and you have this great idea, you're not cognizant of all of those things. So I thought it'd be worth talking a bit about the learning curve. For example, Mira, in your case, I mean, what sort of challenges did you find in terms of figuring out that you needed to know what a sales agent does, how distribution works, and so forth, beyond just learning how to make a good film?
Well, the first step, I left India for the first time when I was 18, 19 on a scholarship to come to Harvard University. I thought I was an actor, and I pursued the theater, but it was really film that I fell in love with over there, and graduated in film. It was an undergraduate degree. We just learned cinema verité, which was very beautiful, with Ricky Leacock and Penny Baker and the greats, actually, but no training in fiction, no training in financing movies, none of that. So I started that right in rooms like this before they were even so nice and fancy. They were like IFC, the Independent Film Center, not IFC as we know it, IFP, sorry.
IFP week, right?
They had these wonderful things for $5 you could attend called hard cash seminars. And I became a student at hard cash seminars. I used to sit there and I would listen to like Judy Irola or the old guard, the great old guard talking about how they got their political, mostly films financed. financed. And it was this system of setting up limited partnerships, of understanding that you could parcel out the budget this way. And I studied that because no one teaches you that, and that became the kind of foundation of going back to the television stations that had bought the documentaries to finance the features. So it was kind of step by step until, thanks to working with a wonderful agent whom I still work with, Bart Walker, and who really created, and Bart works with the Coppolas and all of that, who really helped me actually finesse this idea of, let's have 5 pieces of the puzzle paid for, and then you'll retain your independence. So I co-own, thankfully, a lot of my own movies. I now just got back Mississippi Masala fully after a year and a half of detectives, on it. But that's how I made my films, and it was very tough. Continues to be tough if you want to keep that independence and if you want to make the untraditional film, not the mainstream film, in terms of the subject matter. So I would still say that is the way to go, but it's a very different world now, in terms of post-pandemic, and in terms of the theatrical market really being so wobbly, you don't know which way to go. At least I don't, So I'm now going back to, my new film is about a great Indian modernist painter, Amrita Shergill, sort of like our Frida Kahlo, but really not seen yet. So, and so she grew up in Paris. She started her, foundation was Europe, Europe and Hungary. Her mother was Hungarian, her father was Sardar Sikh, and then she moved back to India. So a large part of her artistic universe was European. And so I'm going to Europe, literally tomorrow, to try to, to talk about, the conversation that this is actually, in some senses, a quasi-European film, and therefore I want to access, the finance that's available there, which is much more interestingly, available for European-based films and so on. So trying to always steer clear of the full mainstream. I've also knocked on the doors of Netflix and Amazon and the usual, money, but sometimes, they act only when they have to act, and I just don't want to, I don't want to give up before I have to, or I never do. So I'm going back to the old ways, actually, of the partial financing from several sources, equity as well, in order to preserve my voice, in order to preserve my vision.
I think that's fascinating because I don't know exactly what's happening with the film industry like right now, of course, but in the last 5 years, I'd say for documentary, people have been, the documentary has become much more commercial in the last 5 years than before. And so folks are hoping for a Netflix or an Amazon or whatever to save the day, or to just be their knight in shining armor or whatever, to make the whole movie. But I'm very inspired by what you're saying about going back to the old way of if only for the reason of preserving your voice and preserving your power within the process. And as we see now, you're later in your career, going back to your first film and retain, thank God, I'm so glad for you, getting the rights back and getting that ownership back, because it's too easy to be tempted by the money and the potential for your career. To give it all away, especially when you're a first or second time filmmaker. It's so tempting, and I think it has been in the mindset of my community, brown girls and other doc folks who are indie, this question of going more big business, if you can, if they want you, of course, if you can. But this idea of voice and power is so crucial to me and to what we do, so I really respect that.
Now, I'm curious, on your end with Decentralized Pictures, hearing these kinds of conversations about ownership and working with agencies and so forth always raises these questions of, well, who ultimately is going to be in charge of this thing, especially if it's successful in some capacity. So how do you address that side of the equation?
Yeah, that's a great question. And for DCP's part, we don't take any ownership or any equity in the film. We, for the most part, for the large awards, would be a financier like any other financier. So enter into a financing relationship where the company would stand to recoup its investment, just like any other financier. But as a 501c3, all of that net revenue goes back into the film fund. But we don't take any ownership or equity. We want that to stay with the filmmaker. Now, this gets to, there are the realities of the industry that are still there, right? And it's still, we're not solving every step of the process. Not yet, anyway. We're working on it, but we're not solving every step of the process. You've still got to navigate, getting talent and getting distribution deals and working out in P&A and raising money for that. What we can help to do is to help navigate through that, help you to partner with mentors and professionals in the industry, like great people like Bart Walker, who can help you to navigate that. That's sort of making those connections, opening those doors that can help with that process. Yeah, it's a very difficult process, it remains so, but we're trying to provide a boost there.
I would like to suggest a little bit of advice from. I've run a film school, a free film school in East Africa called Maisha for the last 16 years, and it's now we are winding it down because we set up to create the idea that there has to be a very excellent local film culture in East Africa and really the continent. But I live in East Africa. Soon after making Mississippi, I settled there and here, and discovered that any few films that were being made about Africa were always through essentially white lenses and not about anything to do with the dignity that I saw around me. So with a few great filmmakers, actually many from New York, Lydia Pilcher, many soldiers of cinema, we set up also 501c3, a Maisha non-profit. Everything is free. We raised money. We had very similar to you, invited scripts. You'd have to already have written in order to have applied, because the idea was to create film directors and not to teach ABC. So anyway, long story short, we've now educated more than 1,000 alumni coming from Maisha, and many percentages of them have become feature film directors and have returned as mentors to us. But the idea was that throughout this process, we're always pairing mentors with the students. Many things, like they have a lovely program we had called Meeting in the Middle, where I taught at Columbia University Film School. We have Maisha. You would take a postdoc student from Columbia to mentor a Maisha feature writing student, and I mean, literally movies have been made, 28 directors have been established, right? So one thing when you're talking about your fund, it's great because it's democratic, but I think that all of us, even who apply for the 250 or whatever, we need a mentor, and you need a mentor with you to help that filmmaker, know how to chart the course, of that 250K that will go in. It'll be helpful and very, I think, important to couple that process of the money with mentorship.
Absolutely, yeah. We, intend to shepherd the filmmakers through the entire life cycle of the film, because really our success is going to be determined by the success of the talent that we discover and the content that we curate through our process. So, like Mike said, we're not taking any IP ownership at all. We will contractually enter into a financing agreement with the filmmaker like any other independent financier, with the idea that we will give the filmmaker, the best leg to stand on when they go to start packaging their film with the parties that be in the industry to help them get through the rest of the life cycle. But we will, offer them resources, and that's why we've, been reaching out for years now to what we're calling the production network to do exactly that. Help the filmmakers that get selected, package their films, and navigate the process. And it's in our best interest to shepherd them through the process, because we're acting as executive producers. We want them to succeed so we can recoup that investment and give it to the next artist down the road.
Quick question. What are we talking about money?
What?
How does it work? The awards are, she said 250, but I didn't hear you say 250.
We use that as an example.
No, that's
Okay.
an example.
It's relative. Is the money relative to the award? Like, are you financing the whole film? Is it a percentage? How are you guys thinking about
it's a good question. It depends.
Basically, show me the money.
How's it gonna work?
No, it's a great
It's all
question.
about transparency, yeah.
Yeah. It depends on the budget of the film. Sometimes it will be full financing. If it's smaller, we're not starting with huge awards. But sometimes it'll be partial financing, and they'll have to go, fill the gap themselves, and we will do our best to introduce them to people and assist in that process.
And how many awards per year are in your mind?
That's a great question. We can't really answer that.
That
but
will depend on how we continue to raise funds for the film fund. We've raised some, and look, and this is an important part of the project. It is on blockchain. We do have our own cryptographic token, and it will be sold, and that will help to raise funds. So based on, and we're also 501c3, so we are working to get donations, to also sponsor awards of a particular subject matter, but also that are available to a particular community exclusively, and we can do that because of the way that we have to do KYC, what's called Know Your Customer. Everyone who signs up, we have to identify them on basic levels to know that they are who they say they are. That's the nature of blockchain these days. And so, and then, through the revenues that we earn from the film. So we have these three sources, and that will determine the size of the film fund, and that will determine what we can offer. But we want to offer as much as we can. We want the films to be as successful as they can. We want to raise as much as we can so that we can provide as many opportunities as possible.
To answer your question a little bit, we are going to try and do at least an award every 2 weeks. They won't be huge, and some of them will just be like, we'll pay your rent for 3 months while you write a screenplay, and that'll be a grant. So not all of the awards will be financing in the traditional sense. Some of them will be grants, and some of them won't be monetary. It'll be, let's get you an agent award where people submit their reels or submit their body of work, and the community will decide who gets, how many of the top, say, 10 finalists get to go get a meeting with an agent and hopefully get representation or a manager out of it. So it's not only about financing, it's about talent discovery as well.
Yeah, but you didn't get a chance to demystify your grant opportunities that you're creating. Can you tell us a bit about the kind of opportunities that Brown Girls Doc Mafia is hoping to provide for filmmakers?
Yes. So we have two grants. One is called the Brown BGDM Artist Sustainable Artist Grant, which supports 5 members of our community. Our grants only go to people who are members of our community who are artists that we want to make sure have support to continue making their work. So it's not project-based, it's about investing in an artist and seeing their potential and making sure they can survive as they work. And then the other one is the BGGM Black Directors Grant, specifically for Black people who are in our community making work. And 5 and 5, so we gave $10,000 to each, plus a year of mentorship and support, specifically surrounding them with a network of advisors, creative and industry advisors, curated to their needs. So it's like very one-to-one in depth with each grantee, like, okay, how are we gonna make you, hopefully, how are we gonna make you blow up, or how can we help you reach your goals, really? Like, what is your personal goals? So it's a range from, well, it works within sort of I don't know what you call it, a criteria that I think about, like, what do you wanna get out of doing this work? Do you want to make money? Do you want butts and seats? Do you want an audience? Do you want critical acclaim? Do you want to make impact? You want to change the world? Or do you want to get more gigs? You want to just get hired? Or do you want freedom? And so we kind of work within that spectrum of outcomes, and they choose one or two, because you can only have one or two, really, and we just help them make decisions in their creative process and their professional development to meet those goals.
So in the very
fantastic. It's great.
Very limited time that we have left, but yeah, we could go deeper on that. But I think one thing that we do need to address before we wrap is something that somehow we've worked around the entire time, which is somehow there's a pandemic going on. Yeah. And so really, in fact, in spite of the fact that we're all in this room, this is obviously an ongoing challenge in spite of the many different kinds of opportunities that are now allowing filmmakers to think outside the box. The last 18 odd months have really forced people to go into survival mode in a lot of situations. So I was hoping everyone could talk just a bit about how this experience has changed the way that you approach the work that you do. Mira, maybe you can lead us off.
Always me.
I know you'll give me something good.
Well, for me, the pandemic is about being able to sift again what is important from what is not. it teaches me that, and all of us, the temporality of life, seriously, And I also lost several people and I dealt a lot with that. But more than that, just because the work itself, I did a 6-hour television series for BBC, which called The Suitable Boy, which just finished shooting December 19th, 2019. And I was in post-production, and then we all shut down and brought all the post back to my little study up on the West Side, and did 6 months of post-production on a 6-hour, essentially like 3 movies, full from orchestrating music in Budapest to editing everything. All of that alone in a room. So it was a major learning and also very exciting that it is still possible to do. But more than all that, and I lost very much in the sense that I didn't get any audience. I didn't get to work the film with people in a room at all, which is a real blow to filmmakers. Even if it's on television, still the audience is what counts. So that was also interesting. But mostly it was a way of taking the pause to inform as to what is important and what we have to do. And it actually, what it did for me is just refuel my commitment to essentially my own work. Although the field was wide open, I never worked harder than in the pandemic because everybody was developing everything, and also we were back in vogue, and so it was like, oh, we gotta have her, because she did whatever it is. So I was dealing with a lot of meetings, but all virtual, but people are just developing anything they can. So again, how to sift the wheat from the chaff and keep to the thing that matters. And I'm still working that out. But having the pandemic a little bit behind us, but not really, the funding and the financing, I would say, is even harder than before because of theatrical not being clear to any of us. The pool is smaller, and the integrity to do good work is stronger. So how do we do that? So I'm still in the struggle, and it's really interestingly the same, I would say. It depends on the work.
Now, did Decentralized Pictures come out of the experience of the pandemic, or was this sort of in motion beforehand?
No, this was in motion before the pandemic, but I have to say, I think DCP in a lot of ways is an illustration of the world we're living in now, because we have developers. The website is built, it's all but ready to go, and Leo and his team have been working diligently alongside of all the other work that's been done to create the company and everything. But all that, since the pandemic started, all that work has been done remotely and virtually with developers all over the world, and a team that's all scattered all over the world. And it has, in a lot of ways we haven't been slowed down because we were already sort of remote and virtual, and it just has sort of emphasized in a new working world that we live in, and the website itself is a remote and virtual way in a lot of ways to find these resources that we're offering, and so it was started before the pandemic, but in a lot of ways it complements the life that we live. I would say, just for me, very simple. Separate from DCP, also the films that I'm working on at AZ. It just costs. It increases the costs of making a film, the COVID costs, and obviously things we have to do. But it just increases those challenges even more of financing. So you've got to raise a little more money now. So that would be sort of my experience.
Iyabo, bring us home. In terms of the past year, what have you gleaned from the kind of impact of this destabilizing effect on the kinds of filmmakers you're looking to support? Obviously, in addition to the pandemic, we also had a racial reckoning in this country, the likes of which we'd never seen before. So with all of that going on, how did that sort of impact your sense of value in the work that you were doing?
Oh, well, our sense of value, it all doubled down. We've been around for 5 years and investing in this community in holistic ways, but it helped that we were already online, like you said. We have a Facebook group of over 5,000 people where we already have this vulnerable digital connection, exchanging resources, hiring each other, venting, sharing your challenges, asking for support. And so that enabled us to roll into the pandemic with community intact, which I think was really crucial because, after a series of surveying the community, like there are so many artists of color right now who are at risk of not being artists anymore because they can't afford to be artists within the context of the pandemic, and so it was just really instrumental for us to have this space, and I'm really proud of that. And in addition to continuing the work, is about doubling down on our dismantling of like the isolation that the system, this industry creates with filmmakers of color. So the community aspect was really crucial for that as well. And that's why we started our fund. I mean, we've been wanting to do funding for a long time, but a lot of documentary funding dried up during the pandemic. And I come from a fundraising background, and I've done a lot of crowdfunding. I just knew that utilizing our community to support, each other, we'd be able to financially have $100,000 to give away, like in a real way, and can do that for the next 3 years. And so, we did this huge fundraiser and raised like $300,000 in a month, and just trying to find ways. So the things that we learned were that people needed to make sure that they weren't isolated, because once you isolated yourself, it's so easy for that voice in your head to say, you can't afford to do this anymore. There's no room for you in this industry. They don't care anymore. But if you can talk to your people, they can keep you on track. So that's like the first thing. And then it's like you still need to find, in the pandemic, there's no more festivals, as you guys know. So even being in a room to network didn't exist anymore, So we had to still create opportunities for our members to meet industry, to meet other filmmakers. So we do all these industry roundtables online and Zoom meetings and things like that. And same thing with getting artistic support, bringing in masterclass speakers and things like that. There's just so many things I can say. I mean, the pandemic was really, really instrumental. The thing that I want to confirm also is that our members, we learned, do this full time. I know that maybe out there people think, 5,000 women of color making movies? How can anyone here name more than 10 women at all who make movies, right? But they're really, what I really learned at the end of this survey process in the pandemic is that there are these women making these movies, and they're doing it full time. This is their job, And that just reignited this confirmation and excitement that we are still and even more on this precipice of breaking through, and that you just have to kind of keep fighting and knowing and confirming that we are here, with some money and some power and some community, we can keep doing it.
So you have all previewed so much on the horizon. I feel like we need to bring you back next year so we can see how everything's coming along. But we are out of time, so thank you all for being here, and thanks everybody for coming out for this conversation. I really got a lot out of it, and I'm sure you all did too. So thanks again.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.